Now Richard Shepard will forensically unpick Jackson's autopsy and piece together what happened in the final hours of his life.
This is the coroner's report into the death of Michael Jackson. These hard, cold medical facts tell us who he was and what he was doing. But more than that, they give us a timeline of the events leading up to his death.
June the 24th, 2009. Jackson is renting a mansion in Beverly Hills. In just 19 days' time, he will embark on a sell-out 50-date residency at London's O2 Arena. 40 years previously, Michael Jackson had burst onto the music scene. As the lead singer with the Jackson 5, he was propelled to international megastardom.
Michael Jackson was the king of pop. He was a king of entertaining. He did things that no one else could do. He was untouchable.
Jackson was the most successful entertainer the world has ever seen. Combined song and concert sales netted him an estimated $750 million. But by June 2009, his personal fortune had all but gone. High-profile court cases and reckless spending had left him on the brink of bankruptcy.
Michael Jackson had essentially been a recluse for 12 years, not touring, not really having any huge record releases like his past. He was around $400 million in debt. He also had over 30 lawsuits lined up against him.
For Jackson, there was only one way out. To ease his debt, he must perform a grueling schedule of concerts in London. And to ensure his health and fitness, he's depending on his personal physician, Dr. Conrad Murray. But Jackson would never make opening night.
So looking at the autopsy, the first thing we see is it's a male of approximately 50 years. There are no significant injuries, but there are some grazes and abrasions to the centre of the chest. I don't think these are significant in causing his death. And I do know that he's had quite prolonged and extensive resuscitation, and these injuries are typical of that type of resuscitation.
Jackson's life was dogged with moments that were both controversial and bizarre. And the secrets revealed by his autopsy are no different.
The autopsy report states that he's black, and that is, of course, correct. But if you looked at the body objectively, not knowing it was Michael Jackson, it wouldn't be that clear-cut.
Millions of column inches have been devoted to the subject of Michael's skin. Was he black? Was he turning white? Was he turning himself white? These are the questions that everyone wanted to know.
The color of your skin is obviously different than it was when you were younger. Yes. And so
Jackson tried to quash the rumors in a TV interview.
It has caused a great deal of speculation.
But the manner of his body language and answers meant few believed him.
What you have done or are doing, are you bleaching your skin? And is your skin lighter because you don't like being black?
I have a skin disorder that destroys the pigmentation of the skin. It's something that I cannot help, okay? But when people make up stories that I don't want to be who I am, it hurts me.
You can see from the autopsy that just as Jackson maintained, he did have a skin condition. In the darker areas, there are lighter blotches, and it appears that in these lighter blotches, the skin has stopped producing pigment.
Cells called melanocytes produce a dark pigment, melanin, that colors the skin. But these cells are absent in the autopsy.
And without these, the skin is pale, and that explains Jackson's appearance. And it's consistent with a disease called vitiligo.
So Jackson did have a skin disease. But doubts still remained about all the claims he made in the interview.
I just want to get this straight. You are not taking anything to change the color of your skin?
Oh, God, no.
You did not purposely?
We're trying to control it, and using makeup evens it out, because evens it out because it makes blotches on the skin, and I have to even out my skin.
But evidence found at the crime scene shows this wasn't true. Jackson spent large amounts of money on a skin bleaching drug called Benequin.
It turns out that Michael had been getting treatment for his vitiligo from a doctor called Arnold Klein for about 25 years.
Based in Beverly Hills, Klein was the dermatologist to the stars. His other clients included Elizabeth Taylor, Carrie Fisher, and Sharon Stone. Klein recommended this lotion to Jackson when they first met. It prevents dark pigment being made in areas unaffected by vitiligo. For half of his life, Jackson had been bleaching his skin. The King of Pop was fixated with his appearance.
There were several scars on his face and neck that are typical of previous plastic surgery. The nose shows extensive signs of modification. It's caved in on one side and the bridge is entirely missing.
Jackson would become addicted to plastic surgery. And this all-consuming obsession can be traced back to a single catastrophic event. On June the 25th, 2009, pop megastar Michael Jackson died suddenly in Los Angeles.
Untimely death of Michael Jackson.
The world was shocked by his passing, asking why the King of Pop died at just 50 years of age. Now, leading forensic pathologist Dr. Richard Shepard is investigating Jackson's autopsy and uncovering hidden secrets from Jackson's life.
There were several scars on his face and neck that are typical of previous plastic surgery. And he'd had a cleft inserted into his chin, which would certainly have changed his appearance. The nose shows extensive signs of modification. It's caved in on one side and the bridge is entirely missing. And this is one of the signs of extensive plastic surgery.
His brothers used to tease him about the size of his nose, calling him Big Nose. It really left an emotional scar on him, and the minute he found out about plastic surgery, he began to have work on his nose.
Over the years, Jackson visited the surgeon's table again and again, changing not only his nose, but almost his entire face. In the press, he became known as Wacko Jacko, was public property. But the autopsy reveals he did manage to keep one secret from the media for 25 years.
Jackson's hair is not his own. He's wearing a wig. It's held on by semi-permanent glue, and there's some sparse areas of his own hair on the sides and the back of his head.
Other than these patches, the King of Pop was almost entirely bald. Despite being a tabloid target, he had kept this hidden for over a quarter of a century.
His scalp reveals the reason for his baldness. There's an area of scarring on the top and the back of his head, and this scarring is consistent with a burn.
In 1984, Jackson was at the height of his powers. His album Thriller had become the biggest-selling album of all time. Filming a Pepsi commercial with his brothers would mark the start of his decline, when a pyrotechnic device set fire to his hair. He suffered severe second and third degree burns to his scalp, which left him needing to wear wigs for the rest of his life.
Michael never recovered from that. The Pepsi incident changed Michael's career forever. Michael became extremely self-conscious about his appearance. He became extremely paranoid about the people around him. He felt damaged, he felt hurt, he felt betrayed.
The accident also triggered a habit that would eventually claim his life. Recovering from his injuries, he became hooked on painkillers. These were gateway drugs that led to multiple drug addictions.
A gateway drug is something that you can buy over the counter. And because they're so hugely available, it means that people who may be susceptible to wanting to take harder drugs can get involved in that process. So you may start on paracetamol and then you may lead up onto much more dangerous drugs.
Over the years, Jackson also became dependent on sedatives, alcohol, anti-anxiety drugs, and even morphine. Without prescription drugs, he could not function, sing, dance, or perform.
I love you. I really do. You have to know that.
But 6 months before his death, Jackson announced a punishing schedule of 50 concerts.
I'll be performing the songs my fans want to hear. This is it. I mean, this is really it. This is the final curtain call.
Before rehearsals began, Michael Jackson was telling everyone how excited he was about coming out and reclaiming his crown as the king of pop, and also showing his kids what he could do on the global stage.
But behind closed doors, the promoters, AEG, were concerned that Jackson wasn't up to performing his trademark high-energy routines. They began to question health scares published by the press. His personal doctor, Conrad Murray, assured them that apart from bouts of insomnia, Jackson was in good physical condition. But not everyone was so convinced. Terry Harvey is a music promoter with close links to the Jackson family.
How fit for someone to have to be in to perform for 2.5 hours in good shape? Do I think Michael didn't have the energy or the stamina for 50 nights? He did not have the stamina to do 30 minutes.
Michael knew deep down there was no way he'd be able to perform 50 shows. Michael told people close to him he didn't know if he could do 2 shows.
So what was the truth about Jackson's fitness? Was he really up to the tour?
The report says that he's 136 pounds in weight and he's 5'9" tall, which gives a BMI of 20.1, which is normal. So although he appears slightly thin, he is within the acceptable range. You might expect some furring up of the arteries in a man aged 50, but Michael Jackson had no evidence of this. And his heart was in good condition too. So for a man of his age, he was in good shape.
Yet Jackson was clearly in trouble at the rehearsals. He seemed short of breath, stiff, and unable to perform the routines he was famous for. In the autopsy, Richard Shepard has found a reason for Jackson's lackluster performance.
Several x-rays were taken of Michael Jackson. They showed he had osteoarthritis in some of his fingers and his spine.
The vertebrae in the spine are cushioned by areas of cartilage. In osteoarthritis, the cartilage degenerates and the bones are left unprotected. This places pressure on the joint, and in extreme circumstances, the bones can grind together.
This is a condition that would cause him some pain and stiffness and might limit his movements.
Osteoarthritis would explain why Jackson isn't performing with his trademark slickness.
It's a degenerative condition that will only get worse. And although it's not uncommon for a man of 50, it can be triggered by an injury.
In 1999, Jackson did suffer an injury to his spine. During a concert in Germany, he plunged 50 feet into the orchestra pit. Although he carried on performing, he collapsed in agony soon afterwards. Osteoarthritis could explain why he was struggling with movement. But it couldn't explain why he was struggling to breathe.
Most of his organs were in good condition for his age. The exception is his lungs, and they were like a battlefield. The lining of the airways showed a lot of damage, and both lungs showed widespread inflammation and quite extensive scarring. For Michael Jackson, it would have made it harder for him to exert himself, and he would have fatigued more easily. The next question I would want to ask is, what's caused all this damage?
A possible explanation is written all over Jackson's face. In his mid-20s, he developed a symmetrical red rash around his cheeks. A classic symptom of another rare skin disease, discoid lupus, which causes hair to fall out anywhere on the body and can damage the lips.
We can see from the autopsy that Jackson had dark tattoos on his eyebrows, and there were tattoos on the eyelids like eyeliner, and he'd also got tattoos in pink around his lips.
Lupus would also explain Jackson's habit of using umbrellas. The disease leaves skin sensitive to sunlight. And it doesn't only affect the skin, it can wreak havoc across the whole body.
Lupus is an autoimmune disease, and these diseases occur when the body attacks parts of itself.
White blood cells usually attack foreign invaders in the body. But in lupus, these cells strike at the body itself, including the lungs, leaving them heavily damaged.
They're chronic diseases with episodes of remission and recurrence. And their recurrence can be triggered by a number of things: stress, exertion, and lack of sleep.
But is there an alternative explanation for Jackson's lung damage? For 25 years, an increasingly unstable and drug-dependent Jackson had been visiting the clinic of dermatologist Dr. Arnold Klein. According to those who worked there, these visits had become less and less about his skin.
He would be in the office a couple times a week, have very minor procedures done. When he got to the office, I would take him in the back door and put him in the procedure room, and at that point I'd go get Dr. Klein's nurse, Ellen, and say, Michael's here and he wants a shot.
On every visit, he'd receive at least one injection. The syringe was full of Demerol, a powerful medical version of heroin.
Usually the effects were pretty quick. He might, pass out. He might be just tired. He might be loopy.
And Jackson didn't always come to see Dr. Klein alone.
If he was with the kids, that would be a little bit of a distraction for him. The kids would usually sit in Dr. Klein's office. They'd be running and screaming and joking, and it would be a lot of fun until Michael got really out of it.
As the tour approached, Jackson's requests for these injections became more and more frequent.
He would come in and he would demand to see Dr. Klein quickly. He would want his shot of Demerol as quickly as possible. And you could tell that there was something going on.
By taking the drug, Jackson risked severe lung damage, addiction, and even death. But Demerol isn't what killed Michael Jackson. Leading forensic pathologist Dr. Richard Shepard is investigating the final hours of Michael Jackson's life.
The autopsy shows there are no significant injuries on the body, and there's no evidence of any significant disease except in the lungs. And so we turn to the next stage. We look for the telltale chemical clues in the body, the toxicology report.
Jackson had well-publicized problems with prescription drugs. He'd been in rehab several times and had admitted to addictions to painkillers. In 2009, he was also having frequent injections of Demerol, a pharmacological equivalent of heroin. And by early June, Jackson was struggling at the rehearsals for his This Is It tour.
Demerol is an incredibly powerful drug. So if you were to turn up at rehearsals on it, the reality is you'd be disorientated, you'd be dizzy, you'd also struggle with your breath. It creates a shortness of breath. Now this is literally the opposite of what is required when you're performing.
But in just 19 days' time, Jackson was due to embark on his record-breaking 50-date residency in London.
Michael Jackson's mind was not ready. While publicly he was telling people, yes, I can do this, it was clear by the way he was not turning up to rehearsals, ignoring important production meetings. This man was not ready for the This Is It comeback.
The situation became so desperate that the tour's producer, Kenny Ortega, sent an impassioned email to the promoters.
My concern is he appeared quite weak and fatigued this evening. He had a terrible case of the chills, was trembling, rambling, and obsessing. Everything in me says he should be psychologically evaluated. Oh, I believe that he really wants this. It would shatter him, break his heart if we pulled the plug. He's terribly frightened. It's all going to go away. It broke my heart. He was like a lost boy. There still may be a chance he can rise to the occasion if we get him the help he needs. Sincerely, Ken.
The promoters issued Jackson an ultimatum. Shape up or they would pull the plug. $400 million in debt. For Jackson, this was not an option.
It was clear that this was about the money being on the line. For Michael, he didn't have a choice. He had to be there or he would lose his home, his kids would be homeless, and he would be in financial ruin.
As this footage shows, 5 days earlier, Jackson had been struggling at rehearsals. He seemed sluggish and not in control of his body. But the effect of the promoter's threat was stunning. His next performance was described as electric by members of the production team. He was agile, lively, and like the Michael Jackson of old.
Suddenly, he makes a miraculous recovery. He gets on stage, he performs 30 to 40 minutes, and he's dancing, he's singing and performing in a way which make them a lot happier.
So how did a 50-year-old man with osteoarthritis, lupus, scarred lungs, and an addiction to Demerol manage to turn it around? The clues lie in Jackson's body, and yet another narcotic.
Extensive toxicological testing was performed on numerous samples taken from Jackson's body. In the urine sample, it was noted that a drug called ephedrine was present. Ephedrine is similar to the naturally occurring adrenaline in the body. And adrenaline is the hormone that prepares the body for fight or flight. When Jackson took ephedrine, it would have been to energize himself.
Jackson had turned to yet another drug. In his house, police discovered tablets of ECA, a powerful stimulant made from caffeine, aspirin, and ephedrine. At high levels, this drug can trigger cardiac failure, the ultimate cause of Jackson's death.
Because the ephedrine is only present in the urine and not in his blood, it can't be having an effect on Jackson's body, and so it can't have contributed to his death.
But the autopsy throws up a further narcotic surprise.
The toxicology analysis looked for but did not find Demerol, and this shows that Jackson hadn't been taking the drug for some time.
Jackson made it through his make-or-break rehearsal by loading his body with stimulants and coming off the heroin-like drug Demerol. But as he returned to his Carrollwood mansion, this strategy would have deadly repercussions. Because suddenly coming off Demerol is highly risky.
The effects of withdrawing from Demerol can be very, very difficult. In fact, if you try to do it on your own, it's downright dangerous. You have issues such as fever, you'll feel a sense of cold turkey, so aches and pains, and one of the biggest side effects is insomnia.
Jackson had been plagued by this sleeping disorder throughout his adult life. Now, he is full of stimulants and in withdrawal from Demerol. But his doctor, Conrad Murray, had no idea Jackson had been taking this drug, let alone that he'd suddenly stopped. Michael Jackson hid his drug habits well.
While at the location conducting one of several searches, we located a number of bottles of prescription medication, not only in Mr. Jackson's name, but in 4 or 5 aliases.
Although the majority of these drugs were prescribed by Murray, some were recorded with other doctors' names.
I'm not saying he was devious. He's the king of manipulation. He was the puppet master. He can tell you what you want to hear and look like it's real, and guess what? You go, okay, he's all right. Come on, let's go.
And Murray was ripe for manipulation. Like Jackson, he was deep in debt. If the London shows didn't go ahead, he too would be financially ruined. One of his roles was to ensure Jackson could sleep. But the autopsy report suggests this would be problematic.
He does have an enlarged prostate, which is not at all unusual for a 50-year-old man. And this might mean he has some difficulty in urination. It might mean he has to go to the toilet more often.
Michael had a condom catheter that he used during his sleep time so that he did not have to wake up or be woken up to go in and use the bathroom.
But Murray's master plan to get Jackson to sleep also had a more sinister pharmaceutical element.
One drug really stands out in the toxicology, and that's propofol. Propofol is an anaesthetic agent, which is normally only used in operating theatres and intensive care units. It's a very powerful drug. Due to its appearance and its effects, it's sometimes known as milk of amnesia.
Jackson had been using propofol as a sleep aid for nearly a decade.
In early 2000s, he was in the hospital one time. They administered Michael propofol. And he said he really liked the drug and became dependent on it and would get doctors to administer it to him.
Over the years, this dependency escalated.
He called me up one Sunday night and he says, "Jason, I need an anesthesiologist." And I said, "What do you need an anesthesiologist for, Michael?" And he says, "Well, I've got a media spot in the morning and I need to be fresh for it." I said, "This is crazy." I said, "I don't understand. I had never in my life heard of anything like this, ever. I was just flabbergasted."
By June 2009, Conrad Murray was feeding Jackson's propofol addiction in the star's own house. For Jackson, it was the ideal drug.
Propofol is a very useful drug because you go to sleep quickly and you wake up cleanly with no hangover. But the line between risk and use can be very narrow, and too much drug can cause fatalities.
Murray has been giving Jackson propofol for 60 nights in a row. But aware of the promoter's ultimatum, he has decided to wean Jackson off the drug. For the last 2 nights, he sent Jackson off to sleep using drugs called benzodiazepines instead. And he administered them in an unusual way.
The autopsy report shows an intravenous injection site below the knee. This is a very rare site for any medical or resuscitation treatment, but it's a common shows an intravenous injection site below the knee. This is a very rare site for any medical or resuscitation treatment, but it's a common site for intravenous drug abuse. Unlike the arms, an injection site on the knee is hidden away and keeps the drug abuse a secret.
When you're actually in the press, you have to consider the fact that people are watching you all the time. You're being observed and your profile is very important to you. So it's not actually unusual for people to inject in areas like the penis, the groin, under the toenails, for example, anything that would distract people around them from seeing that they had an issue. The reality is that this is such a sad thing to see because we know that the user is aware of their problems and aware that they don't want other people to know about them. It means that the user recognises that they have an issue. They just don't want to share that issue.
At 1:30 a.m. on the 25th of June 2009, Conrad Murray Jackson a tablet he hopes will help him sleep.
There is Valium in his system. Valium is a benzodiazepine drug which is used to treat anxiety, but commonly causes some sedation. It is an addictive drug, and long-term use can lead to physical dependence.
But 30 minutes later, Jackson is still awake. Murray turns to a faster-acting benzodiazepine sedative, lorazepam. After an hour, Jackson still hasn't fallen asleep. So Murray tries a third benzodiazepine, midazolam.
It may be a little unusual to find 3 different types of benzodiazepine at the same time, but it seems likely if the intent is to get someone to sleep that one would start with a long-acting Valium-type drug, move to the medium-acting lorazepam, and then finally have to try the very short-acting midazolam. So in this situation, it does make sense.
Throughout the early hours, Murray gives Jackson more and more benzodiazepines. But they have no effect. By 10 a.m., a desperate Jackson asks for his drug of choice, his milk.
My milk.
He wants propofol. He wants propofol. But Murray resists.
My milk.
Jackson protests. He can't function without sleep and will have to cancel the concert. At 10:50 a.m., Conrad Murray finally relents and prepares a dose of propofol. As this drug burns when it enters the body, Murray adds a local anesthetic, lidocaine, to numb the pain. Jackson is unconscious at last. Fifteen minutes later, Conrad Murray re-enters the singer's bedroom.
Michael! Michael! Michael!
Jackson is not breathing. But Murray thinks he can feel a pulse.
Michael!
He searches for flumazanil, a drug that reverses the effects of benzodiazepines. But there's no antidote for propofol.
Michael! 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 Michael!
At 11:05 a.m. on the 25th of June 2009, Michael Jackson is found unconscious and not breathing. But his personal physician, Conrad Murray, can feel a pulse.
Michael! Michael! Michael!
Fire paramedic 33, what is your emergency?
Sir, we have a gentleman here that needs help, and he's not breathing yet. He's not breathing. Trying to pump him, but he's breathing yet. He's not breathing. Trying to pump him, but he's not.
Okay. Okay, how old is he?
He's 50 years old, sir.
50, okay.
He's not breathing, sir.
Okay, and he's not conscious either.
He's not conscious, sir.
Okay. Is he on the floor? Where's he at right now?
He's on the bed, sir. He's on the bed.
Okay, let's get him on the floor.
Okay.
Okay, let's get him down to the floor. I'm going to help you with CPR right now, okay?
We need him. We need a...
Yes, we're already on our way there. We're on our way. I'm going to do as much as I can to help you over the phone. We're already on our way. Did anybody see him?
Yes, we have a personal doctor here with him, sir.
Oh, you have a doctor there?
Yes, but he's not responding to CPR or anything.
Okay. Did anybody witness what happened?
No, just the doctor, sir. The doctor's the only one here. He's pumping his chest, but he's not responding to anything, sir. Please.
Okay, we're on our way.
Okay, over here.
By the time the paramedics arrive, Murray can no longer detect a pulse.
Check his airways clear. Got that yet? We're not getting a pulse. Give me a line. Clear. Come on.
Jackson's body is rushed to hospital, but it's too late.
At 14:26, on the 25th of June 2009, Michael Joseph Jackson was declared dead at the UCLA Medical Center, Los Angeles. The autopsy report concludes that his cause of death was acute propofol intoxication, with a contributory factor in the death being benzodiazepines.
Once in the bloodstream, both these drugs spread around the body. When they reach the lungs, they have a profound effect. They slow the rate the lungs inflate and deflate, so critically decreasing their ability to oxygenate the body.
And you've got to remember that Jackson had really bad lungs, and these things combined have caused the oxygen in his bloodstream to get to such a low level that his heart and his brain have stopped working, and he has died.
2 months after his death, the autopsy results were announced.
The LA County coroner has ruled Michael Jackson's death a homicide.
The prime suspect was Dr. Conrad Murray. He was tried for involuntary manslaughter. At the trial, the smoking gun was propofol.
Conrad Murray states that he gave Jackson 25 milligrams of propofol at 10:40 a.m. And yet the toxicology report shows there was far more than that in Jackson's bloodstream when he died. So the question remains, how are we going to explain this discrepancy?
Misplaced trust.
In court, Murray claimed that this anomaly was not of his doing. He suggested it was all down to the other person in the room, Jackson himself.
And Dr. Murray left the room. Michael Jackson self-administered a dose, an additional dose of propofol. And it killed him. And it killed him like that, and there was no way to save him.
But the prosecution had a different version of events. A version that implicated Murray as guilty.
Conrad Murray's actions directly caused the death of Michael Jackson.
They claimed Murray had cobbled together a system that kept Jackson continually topped up with propofol whilst he slept. Murray cut into the lid of a bottle of the drug. Once in the saline bag, the propofol could then infuse constantly into Jackson's bloodstream. Normally, saline coming down from the bag mixes with drugs injected at a port and washes them into the body. The prosecution maintained the drug was already mixed with the saline. So, there should be traces of propofol in the tube above the injection port. Despite testing, traces of the drug were never detected. Yet this didn't sway the jury.
I am advised that the jury has reached a verdict.
We, the jury in the above entitled action, find the defendant, Conrad Robert Murray, guilty of the crime of involuntary manslaughter.
Burn in hell.
And the autopsy supports the court's verdict. Conrad Murray failed in his duty as a doctor.
Propofol is a very powerful anaesthetic. There's a very fine line between its proper effects and causing death. In hospital, an anaesthesiologist would have the patient attached to numerous machines which would monitor pulse and blood pressure. Powerful anaesthetic. There's a very fine line between its proper effects and causing death. In hospital, an anaesthesiologist would have the patient attached to numerous machines which would monitor pulse and blood pressure, carbon dioxide levels and oxygen levels.
But investigators found no evidence of any medical monitors in the mansion. Murray was sentenced to 4 years in prison for killing the King of Pop. In a 40-year career, Jackson had established himself as the most successful act of all time. But his success had long been underpinned by a reliance on prescription drugs.
It was such a tragedy seeing him go from this huge, larger-than-life figure down this road of drug dependency. These drugs had turned him into just a shell of his former self.
He didn't have a choice.